Many people go through moments in life that leave them with an unsettling question. Was that really just a coincidence? It might begin with a passing thought about someone you have not seen in years, only for that person to call you moments later. It may happen when you repeatedly encounter the same symbol, number, or phrase during a period of emotional confusion. These experiences often create a deep emotional reaction that cannot easily be explained by logic. While most people dismiss them as random chance, Carl Jung believed they deserved closer attention. He introduced the concept of synchronicity to describe meaningful coincidences that connect our inner psychological world with events in the external world without any direct cause and effect relationship. According to Jung, these moments are not magical tricks or supernatural interventions. Instead, they reveal a hidden dialogue between the unconscious mind and reality itself. Human beings naturally search for meaning. Our minds are not satisfied with seeing life as a collection of disconnected events. We instinctively try to understand why certain experiences happen when they do and why some moments seem to carry extraordinary emotional weight. Jung believed this desire for meaning is not a weakness but a fundamental part of human psychology. Synchronicity emerges precisely because the psyche seeks connections that go beyond physical causality. A meaningful coincidence is significant not because one event caused another, but because both events share a symbolic relationship that reflects something important happening within the individual. Imagine standing at a crossroads in your life, uncertain about which direction to take. You feel emotionally exhausted, questioning your career, relationships, or purpose. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, you hear a conversation between strangers discussing the exact dilemma you are facing. Later that same day, you open a book at random, and the first sentence addresses the very question that has occupied your thoughts for weeks. Logic may insist these are unrelated events, but your emotional response tells a different story. Something inside you feels acknowledged, as though reality itself is reflecting your inner condition. Jung argued that such moments deserve attention because they reveal the deep interaction between consciousness and the unconscious. One of the most remarkable aspects of synchronicity is that its significance is entirely personal. Two people may witness the exact same event, yet only one experiences it as profoundly meaningful. A butterfly landing on a window may seem ordinary to one person, but to someone grieving the loss of a loved one who cherished butterflies, it may feel like a deeply symbolic experience. The power of synchronicity lies not in the external event itself but in the psychological meaning it awakens. The event becomes important because it resonates with something hidden within the individual's emotional and symbolic life. Modern society often encourages people to trust only what can be measured, calculated, and scientifically explained. Rational thinking has brought extraordinary advancements, yet it sometimes leaves little room for experiences that cannot be neatly categorized. Jung did not reject science. He was a trained psychiatrist who valued careful observation. However, after decades of working with patients, he encountered too many meaningful coincidences to dismiss them as mere accidents. He noticed that people undergoing profound psychological transformations frequently experienced symbolic events that seemed connected to their inner struggles. These experiences challenged the traditional understanding of causality and opened the possibility that life contains patterns beyond mechanical explanations. Synchronicity invites us to rethink the nature of reality itself. Rather than viewing the mind and the external world as completely separate, Jung proposed that they sometimes mirror one another in mysterious ways. During significant moments, an internal psychological process and an external event may unfold simultaneously, creating an experience filled with symbolic meaning. This does not mean thoughts magically create reality or that the universe grants wishes. Instead, it suggests that under certain conditions, inner and outer events align in ways that reveal deeper psychological truths. This perspective changes how we approach unexpected experiences. Instead of immediately asking, "How did this happen?" Synchronicity encourages us to ask, "What does this mean to me?" The focus shifts from seeking physical explanations to exploring symbolic significance. This approach transforms ordinary life into an ongoing conversation between the conscious self and the unconscious mind. Every meaningful coincidence becomes an invitation to reflect rather than react. Many people first encounter synchronicity during emotionally intense periods. A person recovering from heartbreak may repeatedly hear the same song wherever they go. Someone contemplating a major life change may keep encountering the same phrase or symbol in different places. These repeated experiences often feel impossible to ignore because they resonate with an emotional need that has not yet been consciously acknowledged. Jung believed the unconscious deliberately draws attention to these moments because they serve an important psychological purpose. The unconscious mind communicates differently from the conscious mind. It does not speak through logical arguments or straightforward language. Instead, it expresses itself through dreams, symbols, emotions, fantasies, and synchronistic events. When a meaningful coincidence occurs, it is as though the unconscious finds a creative way to project an inner reality onto the external world. This symbolic communication helps bridge the gap between what we consciously know and what we unconsciously feel. People often misunderstand synchronicity by reducing it to superstition or wishful thinking. They assume every repeated number or unusual coincidence must carry a cosmic message. Jung warned against this simplistic interpretation. Not every coincidence is synchronistic. The defining characteristic is not rarity but meaning. A synchronistic event leaves a lasting psychological impact. It creates a feeling of profound recognition, as though something hidden has suddenly become visible. The experience changes how a person understands themselves or their situation. This emotional quality distinguishes synchronicity from ordinary chance. Random events occur constantly, but they usually pass unnoticed because they carry no personal significance. A synchronistic event, however, captures attention immediately. It produces a sense of awe, curiosity, or even discomfort because it touches something deeply personal. The experience often remains vivid in memory for years, continuing to influence the individual's perspective long after the event itself has passed. Jung believed these moments often accompany psychological growth. As individuals move through important stages of life, the unconscious attempts to guide them toward greater self-awareness. Meaningful coincidences become symbolic markers along this journey. They encourage people to examine hidden fears, unresolved conflicts, and neglected aspects of themselves. Instead of providing direct answers, synchronicity invites deeper questions. It asks individuals to become active participants in understanding their own lives. This process requires openness rather than blind belief. Jung never suggested accepting every coincidence as absolute truth. Instead, he encouraged thoughtful reflection. What emotions did the event awaken? What personal situation does it relate to? What unconscious conflict might it be highlighting? These questions transform synchronicity from mystical entertainment into a powerful tool for psychological exploration. Over time, people who pay attention to meaningful coincidences often develop a stronger relationship with their inner world. They become more aware of recurring emotional patterns, symbolic themes, and intuitive insights. Rather than feeling controlled by external circumstances, they begin recognizing how their inner psychological state influences their perception of reality. This awareness fosters greater emotional maturity and self-understanding. Synchronicity also reminds us that life may possess dimensions of meaning that cannot always be reduced to statistics or probability. While science excels at explaining physical mechanisms, human experience includes subjective realities that are equally important. Love, grief, beauty, purpose, and symbolic meaning cannot be fully measured, yet they shape every aspect of our lives. Jung believed synchronicity belongs to this realm of lived experience, where meaning matters more than mechanism. Ultimately, synchronicity challenges the assumption that existence is entirely random. It does not claim that every event is predetermined or orchestrated by supernatural forces. Instead, it suggests that under certain conditions, meaningful connections emerge between our inner psychological lives and the world around us. These moments encourage us to pause, reflect, and listen to aspects of ourselves that are often ignored in the noise of everyday life. Whether one interprets synchronicity as a psychological phenomenon, a spiritual experience, or simply an intriguing mystery, its greatest value lies in its ability to awaken deeper self-awareness. It reminds us that sometimes the most important events are not those that can be logically explained, but those that quietly transform the way we understand ourselves and our place in the unfolding story of life. The unconscious mind is one of the most mysterious and influential aspects of human existence. Every person believes they are fully aware of their thoughts, choices, and emotions, yet according to Carl Jung, the conscious mind represents only a small portion of the psyche. Beneath our everyday awareness lies an immense inner world that constantly influences our behavior, dreams, emotions, fears, desires, and decisions. This hidden realm is called the unconscious, and unlike the conscious mind, it does not communicate through ordinary language. It speaks through symbols. These symbols appear in dreams, recurring images, emotional reactions, myths, fantasies, meaningful coincidences, and synchronistic experiences. Understanding this symbolic language is one of the most important steps toward understanding ourselves. From the moment we are born, our minds begin collecting experiences. Some memories remain accessible, while others disappear beneath conscious awareness. Painful childhood experiences, forgotten fears, hidden desires, unresolved conflicts, and unexpressed emotions do not simply vanish. They become part of the unconscious. Yet the unconscious is much more than a storage room for forgotten memories. Jung described it as a living psychological system filled with creativity, wisdom, instincts, and untapped potential. It is constantly active, even when we are asleep, shaping our perceptions without our knowledge. Unlike the conscious mind, which relies on words and logic, the unconscious communicates through images and symbols because symbols can express ideas that ordinary language cannot. A single symbol can contain multiple meanings simultaneously. It can represent fear and hope, death and rebirth, endings and beginnings. Symbols possess emotional depth that simple explanations often fail to capture. This is why dreams rarely present straightforward messages. Instead, they offer symbolic stories filled with mysterious characters, unfamiliar places, strange animals, and impossible events. The unconscious invites interpretation rather than giving direct instructions. Imagine dreaming about being lost inside a dark forest. The dream never says, "You are confused about your future." Instead, it presents the experience symbolically. The forest represents uncertainty. Darkness reflects ignorance or fear. Searching for a path symbolizes your desire for direction. Every image carries emotional meaning rather than literal information. Jung believed that dreams are not random collections of meaningless images but carefully constructed messages from the unconscious attempting to restore psychological balance. This symbolic communication extends far beyond dreams. Throughout daily life, symbols constantly surround us. A particular animal repeatedly crossing your path during a difficult period, a recurring number that captures your attention whenever you think about an important decision, or repeatedly encountering the same phrase in different places may all function as symbolic reminders. Jung emphasized that the significance of these experiences depends entirely on their psychological meaning for the individual. A symbol becomes powerful because it resonates with something hidden within the person's inner world. Many people dismiss symbols because modern culture values literal thinking above symbolic understanding. We are taught to search for direct explanations and measurable evidence. If something cannot be scientifically verified, it is often ignored. Yet human beings naturally think symbolically. Literature, religion, mythology, art, and music all depend upon symbols to express emotional truths that ordinary language cannot fully describe. Jung believed the unconscious uses this same symbolic language because it reaches parts of the psyche that rational arguments cannot. Consider the experience of grief. Someone mourning the loss of a loved one may repeatedly dream about oceans, empty houses, or broken bridges. These images are not random decorations created by the sleeping brain. They symbolize emotional realities that words struggle to express. The ocean may represent overwhelming emotions. The empty house may symbolize loneliness. The broken bridge may reflect the painful separation between life and death. Through these symbols, the unconscious helps individuals gradually process experiences too overwhelming for direct confrontation. The unconscious also communicates through emotional reactions that seem disproportionate to present circumstances. Sometimes a small criticism produces intense anger. A harmless situation triggers overwhelming anxiety. A stranger immediately inspires trust or fear without logical explanation. Jung suggested these powerful emotional responses often originate from unconscious material seeking recognition. The external event simply activates an internal symbol or unresolved conflict that already existed beneath awareness. One of Jung's greatest contributions to psychology was his understanding of archetypes. Archetypes are universal symbolic patterns existing within the unconscious of every human being. They are inherited psychological structures shared across cultures and generations. Although societies differ greatly, similar symbolic figures appear repeatedly in myths, religions, fairy tales, and dreams throughout history. These recurring images reveal the collective symbolic language of humanity. The hero is one of the most familiar archetypes. It represents courage, growth, sacrifice, and transformation. Every culture tells stories about heroes who leave ordinary life, confront terrifying challenges, overcome inner and outer obstacles, and return transformed. Jung believed this story reflects the psychological journey every individual must eventually undertake. The hero is not merely a fictional character but a symbolic representation of human development. Another important archetype is the shadow. The shadow contains the aspects of ourselves we reject, deny, or refuse to acknowledge. These qualities may include anger, jealousy, selfishness, fear, insecurity, or even hidden talents we are afraid to express. Because the conscious mind rejects these traits, they sink into the unconscious. Yet they do not disappear. Instead, they continue influencing behavior from behind the scenes. The unconscious often presents the shadow through frightening dream figures, hostile strangers, or disturbing symbolic experiences that challenge our self-image. The wise old man and the wise woman represent guidance, insight, and inner wisdom. These archetypes frequently appear during periods of uncertainty, offering symbolic direction rather than simple answers. They remind individuals that deep wisdom already exists within the psyche, waiting to be discovered through reflection rather than external authority. The Great Mother symbolizes creation, protection, nurturing, fertility, and unconditional love. Yet she also possesses a darker side representing dependence, control, and emotional suffocation. Jung emphasized that every symbol contains both light and shadow. Nothing within the unconscious is entirely positive or entirely negative. Psychological growth requires accepting this complexity instead of seeking simplistic interpretations. Symbols also appear through synchronicity. When an external event unexpectedly mirrors an internal emotional state, the unconscious seems to project its symbolic language into reality itself. A person struggling with transformation may repeatedly encounter butterflies. Someone facing emotional healing may notice recurring images of water. An individual confronting fear may repeatedly dream of climbing mountains before unexpectedly encountering mountain imagery throughout daily life. These experiences are psychologically meaningful because the symbol reflects an inner process already unfolding. However, interpreting symbols requires patience and honesty. There is no universal dictionary assigning one fixed meaning to every image. Although archetypes provide general themes, each symbol acquires unique significance within the individual's personal life. A snake, for example, may symbolize healing, wisdom, temptation, danger, renewal, sexuality, fear, or transformation depending upon the person's experiences and emotional associations. Jung warned against rigid interpretations because symbols are living psychological realities rather than mathematical equations. Many people spend years ignoring the unconscious. They suppress uncomfortable emotions, avoid painful memories, and distract themselves with constant activity. Yet the unconscious never becomes silent. What remains unacknowledged eventually finds expression through anxiety, depression, compulsive behavior, recurring relationship patterns, unexplained emotional reactions, physical stress, or synchronistic experiences. The unconscious persistently seeks integration because psychological health depends upon dialogue between conscious awareness and hidden inner life. Jung believed that the purpose of symbolic communication is not to confuse us but to heal us. Every dream, meaningful coincidence, recurring image, or emotionally powerful symbol offers an invitation to greater self-awareness. The unconscious is not an enemy working against us. It is a guide attempting to restore psychological wholeness by revealing aspects of ourselves we have neglected or forgotten. When individuals begin paying attention to symbolic experiences, they often discover remarkable patterns within their lives. Recurring dreams reveal long-standing fears. Meaningful coincidences illuminate hidden decisions. Emotional reactions expose unconscious beliefs. Slowly, the scattered fragments of the psyche begin forming a coherent picture. What once appeared chaotic gradually reveals an underlying order shaped by symbols carrying profound personal meaning. Ultimately, Jung believed that learning the language of symbols transforms the relationship between the conscious mind and the unconscious. Instead of living as strangers within ourselves, we begin developing an ongoing conversation with the deepest parts of our psyche. Symbols become bridges connecting visible experience with invisible reality. Through them, the unconscious reveals not only our wounds but also our strengths, not only our fears but also our untapped potential. By learning to recognize and understand this symbolic language, we move closer to becoming fully integrated human beings, capable of living with greater wisdom, authenticity, and inner harmony. There are certain periods in life when everything that once felt stable suddenly begins to fall apart. A career that once provided purpose loses its meaning. A relationship that seemed permanent unexpectedly ends. Long-held beliefs begin to feel empty, and familiar routines no longer bring comfort. During these moments, people often experience a strange sense of uncertainty, as though they are standing between two versions of themselves. According to Carl Jung, it is precisely during these periods of transition that synchronicity becomes most active. Meaningful coincidences are not distributed randomly throughout life. They tend to emerge when a person is undergoing deep psychological change, when the conscious mind no longer has all the answers, and the unconscious begins trying to guide the individual toward a new stage of development. Most people assume that transformation happens gradually and logically. They believe that major changes come only after careful planning and deliberate decision-making. Yet real life rarely unfolds so neatly. Genuine transformation often begins with confusion rather than clarity. Before a new identity can emerge, the old one must begin to dissolve. This process is emotionally uncomfortable because human beings naturally resist uncertainty. We prefer familiar pain over unfamiliar possibilities. We cling to routines, relationships, and beliefs simply because they are known, even when they no longer serve us. Jung believed that during these moments of resistance, the unconscious begins communicating more intensely, and synchronicity becomes one of its most powerful methods of expression. Imagine someone who has spent years pursuing a career that satisfies everyone except themselves. Outwardly, they appear successful, yet inwardly they feel empty and disconnected. They ignore this feeling for years, convincing themselves that fulfillment will eventually arrive. Then unexpected events begin occurring. They repeatedly encounter books about purpose. Conversations with strangers somehow revolve around changing careers. A forgotten childhood dream suddenly returns through recurring dreams or memories. These events may appear unrelated, but together they form a symbolic pattern pointing toward an inner truth the individual has been avoiding. According to Jung, this is synchronicity at work. The unconscious is attempting to redirect consciousness toward a more authentic path. Life transitions come in many forms. Some are obvious, such as graduation, marriage, parenthood, retirement, or the death of a loved one. Others are invisible to the outside world but equally significant. A person may begin questioning their identity, values, faith, or purpose without anyone else noticing. Internally, however, a profound transformation is taking place. The old psychological structure begins breaking apart while a new one has not yet fully formed. This in-between state creates psychological tension, making the unconscious increasingly active. Jung believed that psychological growth requires periods of disorientation. Every meaningful transformation begins with uncertainty because the conscious mind cannot immediately understand what the unconscious is preparing. During stable periods, the ego feels confident and in control. It believes it understands life. But during transitions, this confidence weakens. Familiar explanations no longer work. Old solutions fail to solve new problems. It is precisely when the conscious mind reaches its limits that the unconscious finds space to communicate. Synchronicity serves as a bridge during these uncertain periods. Instead of providing direct instructions, it presents symbolic guidance. A chance encounter may introduce someone who changes the direction of your life. A repeated image may draw your attention toward an unresolved emotional issue. A dream may reveal fears you never consciously recognized. These experiences do not force change, they invite reflection. They gently encourage individuals to consider possibilities they might otherwise ignore. One reason synchronicity becomes more frequent during transitions is that emotional intensity increases psychological awareness. When life feels predictable, people operate largely on habit. They stop noticing subtle details because routine requires little conscious attention. During crisis, however, awareness sharpens. Every conversation feels significant. Every decision carries emotional weight. The mind becomes more receptive to symbolic experiences because survival itself seems to depend upon finding meaning within uncertainty. Grief provides one of the clearest examples of this process. Losing someone deeply loved creates an emotional rupture that fundamentally changes how a person experiences reality. The future suddenly feels unfamiliar. Identity becomes uncertain. During this period, many individuals report extraordinary coincidences. They dream vividly about the deceased. They unexpectedly hear songs carrying special significance. They encounter meaningful symbols associated with the person they lost. Whether interpreted psychologically or spiritually, these experiences often provide comfort and facilitate healing. Jung viewed them as expressions of the unconscious attempting to help the psyche adapt to overwhelming emotional change. Similarly, major failures often become fertile ground for synchronicity. Society teaches people to avoid failure at all costs, yet Jung believed psychological development frequently begins where external success ends. A failed relationship, lost job, financial collapse, or personal disappointment may initially appear destructive. However, these experiences dismantle outdated identities, creating space for deeper self-discovery. As familiar structures collapse, the unconscious introduces symbolic experiences that guide the rebuilding process. Loneliness also creates conditions favorable for synchronicity. When external distractions disappear, individuals inevitably confront themselves. Without constant stimulation, hidden emotions surface. Forgotten dreams reappear. Long-suppressed questions demand attention. During solitude, the dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious becomes more noticeable because fewer external voices compete for attention. Meaningful coincidences occurring during these periods often carry exceptional psychological significance because they emerge precisely when the individual is searching for direction. Jung described this process as part of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming one's authentic self. Individuation requires abandoning false identities shaped by social expectations, family pressures, and unconscious fears. This transformation cannot occur comfortably because it involves confronting aspects of ourselves we would rather avoid. The unconscious, therefore, introduces symbolic experiences designed to challenge existing assumptions and encourage deeper reflection. Sometimes synchronicity appears just before important decisions. An individual uncertain about relocating to another city repeatedly encounters references to that place. Someone debating whether to leave an unhealthy relationship experiences recurring dreams emphasizing freedom or renewal. A person contemplating a creative project unexpectedly meets individuals whose stories inspire confidence. These events do not dictate the correct choice. Rather, they illuminate psychological dynamics already present within the individual. One of Jung's central insights was that the unconscious is future-oriented as well as past-oriented. While many psychologists focus primarily on childhood experiences and repressed memories, Jung believed the unconscious also contains unrealized potential. It does not merely preserve what has been forgotten, it actively encourages what is waiting to emerge. During life transitions, synchronistic experiences often point not toward the past but toward the future self struggling to be born. This explains why meaningful coincidences frequently feel hopeful even during painful periods. Although external circumstances remain difficult, synchronistic events often produce a quiet sense that life still possesses meaning. They suggest that beneath apparent chaos, an invisible process of growth continues unfolding. The individual may not yet understand where life is leading, but the experience creates trust that transformation is possible. However, Jung warned against becoming obsessed with searching for signs everywhere. Psychological transitions naturally increase symbolic awareness, but not every unusual event carries profound significance. True synchronicity possesses emotional depth rather than mere novelty. It creates lasting psychological impact because it resonates with genuine inner transformation. The goal is not collecting mysterious experiences but developing greater self-understanding. Another reason synchronicity intensifies during transitions is that the ego becomes less rigid. Under ordinary circumstances, the conscious personality filters experience according to existing beliefs. Information contradicting these beliefs is often ignored. During crisis, however, certainty collapses. Individuals become more open to possibilities they previously dismissed. This psychological openness allows unconscious material to emerge more freely, increasing the likelihood of synchronistic experiences. Throughout history, many religious traditions, myths, and spiritual teachings have recognized this connection between crisis and transformation. Heroes in ancient stories rarely receive guidance while living comfortably. Instead, symbolic encounters occur after exile, loss, failure, or isolation. They meet mysterious guides, discover magical objects, or receive visions precisely because they have entered unfamiliar psychological territory. Jung believed these myths reflect universal patterns of human development. Modern synchronicity represents the same symbolic process unfolding within contemporary life. Importantly, synchronicity does not remove uncertainty. It does not eliminate fear or guarantee success. Instead, it changes the individual's relationship with uncertainty itself. Rather than viewing crisis as meaningless suffering, people begin recognizing it as part of a larger psychological journey. The external difficulties remain real, but they acquire symbolic significance that transforms despair into possibility. Ultimately, life transitions are not interruptions of personal growth, they are its essential foundation. Every meaningful transformation requires leaving behind an outdated version of oneself before a new identity can emerge. During these vulnerable periods, the unconscious becomes increasingly active, communicating through dreams, symbols, emotions, and meaningful coincidences. Synchronicity acts as a quiet companion along this uncertain path, reminding individuals that beneath confusion, an invisible process of renewal is already unfolding. It encourages patience when answers are unavailable, courage when fear dominates, and trust when the future remains unclear. According to Jung, these symbolic moments are not random interruptions of ordinary life but invitations to participate consciously in the deepest process of all, becoming the person we were always meant to be. Carl Jung believed that the human mind extends far beyond personal memories, individual experiences, and conscious thoughts. While most psychological theories focused on childhood, family, and personal development, Jung proposed something far more profound. He suggested that beneath every individual's personal unconscious exists an even deeper layer shared by all human beings regardless of culture, language, religion, or historical period. He called this mysterious realm the collective unconscious. It is not built from personal experiences but inherited as part of being human. It contains universal patterns, symbolic images, instincts, and archetypes that have guided humanity for thousands of years. According to Jung, many experiences of synchronicity emerge from this shared psychological foundation, revealing that human beings are connected in ways that ordinary consciousness cannot fully comprehend. To understand the collective unconscious, imagine the ocean. On its surface, every wave appears separate, moving independently across the water. Yet beneath the surface, all waves belong to the same vast ocean. Individual consciousness resembles these waves. Each person possesses unique memories, personalities, beliefs, and experiences. However, beneath these differences lies a shared psychological depth connecting every human being. Jung believed this hidden layer explains why people from completely different cultures create remarkably similar myths, dreams, religious symbols, and stories despite having no contact with one another. Throughout history, civilizations separated by continents developed nearly identical symbolic figures. Ancient Egypt, Greece, India, China, Africa, and indigenous cultures all told stories about heroic journeys, wise elders, great mothers, tricksters, dragons, floods, sacred trees, serpents, death, rebirth, and spiritual transformation. These similarities puzzled historians because many of these societies evolved independently. Jung argued that these recurring symbols did not spread solely through cultural exchange. Instead, they emerged naturally from the collective unconscious because they represent universal structures of the human psyche. These universal symbolic patterns are known as archetypes. Archetypes are not fixed characters but psychological blueprints shaping how people experience life. Every individual encounters these patterns throughout existence, often without realizing it. The hero, the mother, the shadow, the child, the wise old man, the trickster, and the self are among the most significant archetypes identified by Jung. They appear repeatedly in dreams, myths, literature, films, religious traditions, and synchronistic experiences because they express timeless aspects of human existence. The hero archetype represents courage, struggle, sacrifice, and transformation. Every meaningful life journey requires confronting fear, overcoming obstacles, and emerging changed. Whether found in ancient mythology or modern storytelling, the hero symbolizes the psychological process of becoming stronger through adversity. Jung believed that when individuals experience life transitions, synchronistic events often activate the hero archetype, encouraging them to embrace personal growth instead of remaining trapped by fear. The shadow represents everything individuals reject within themselves. It contains hidden anger, jealousy, selfishness, insecurity, shame, and even positive qualities that remain undeveloped because they conflict with one's self-image. Most people spend years denying their shadow, believing they are only the qualities they consciously recognize. Yet the shadow constantly influences behavior from beneath awareness. During periods of psychological transformation, synchronistic experiences frequently expose the shadow by confronting individuals with situations that force them to acknowledge hidden aspects of themselves. The Great Mother archetype expresses nurturing, protection, fertility, compassion, and unconditional love. At the same time, she also possesses a darker dimension representing emotional dependence, possessiveness, and overwhelming control. This duality illustrates one of Jung's most important insights. Every archetype contains both creative and destructive possibilities. Human psychology cannot be divided into simple categories of good and evil. True maturity requires accepting this complexity rather than seeking perfect purity. The wise old man and wise woman symbolize wisdom, intuition, guidance, and spiritual understanding. These figures often appear during moments of uncertainty, either through dreams, literature, teachers, mentors, or synchronistic encounters with strangers whose words unexpectedly provide profound insight. Jung believed these archetypes represent the inner wisdom already existing within the psyche, waiting to be recognized when conscious certainty begins to fail. Perhaps the most important archetype is the self. Unlike the ego, which represents conscious identity, the self symbolizes psychological wholeness. It is the organizing center of the entire psyche, integrating conscious awareness with unconscious potential. The lifelong process of individuation seeks to bring the ego into harmony with the self. Synchronistic experiences often emerge when individuals move closer to this deeper psychological center, signaling important stages along the path toward greater authenticity. Jung believed that synchronicity gains extraordinary power because it frequently activates these universal archetypes. Imagine someone repeatedly dreaming about climbing mountains while simultaneously encountering mountain imagery throughout daily life. The mountain does not simply represent physical elevation. Across countless cultures, mountains symbolize spiritual ascent, challenge, perspective, and transformation. The synchronistic appearance of this symbol reflects not merely personal circumstances but participation in a timeless human psychological pattern. Similarly, the serpent appears throughout nearly every civilization's mythology. Some traditions associate it with healing and renewal. Others emphasize wisdom, temptation, danger, sexuality, or rebirth. Jung observed that despite cultural differences, the serpent consistently represents powerful instinctive energies requiring conscious integration. When serpent imagery repeatedly appears during periods of transformation, the unconscious may be expressing universal psychological themes shared by humanity itself. The collective unconscious also explains why certain dreams feel strangely familiar despite containing places, symbols, or characters never previously encountered. Many individuals report dreaming of ancient temples, mysterious guides, unknown languages, sacred animals, or symbolic rituals without any conscious exposure to such imagery. Jung believed these dreams emerged directly from archetypal patterns residing within the collective unconscious rather than personal memory alone. Religion provides another powerful example of the collective unconscious at work. Across different traditions, similar symbolic themes repeatedly emerge. Stories of death and resurrection, floods cleansing humanity, divine births, sacred journeys, heavenly light, and final judgment appear throughout world religions. Jung did not interpret these similarities merely as historical borrowing. He viewed religious symbolism as spontaneous expressions of universal psychological realities arising from the collective unconscious. Art, literature, and cinema continue expressing these archetypal themes because creators unconsciously draw upon the same symbolic reservoir. Great stories resonate across generations not simply because they entertain, but because they activate universal psychological patterns recognized by the human soul. Whether reading ancient epics or watching contemporary films, audiences emotionally connect with archetypal characters because they mirror internal psychological structures already existing within themselves. Synchronicity often becomes especially meaningful when collective archetypes emerge simultaneously in both inner and outer experience. A person struggling with profound personal change may repeatedly encounter butterflies, symbols of transformation recognized across numerous cultures. Someone confronting fear may repeatedly dream of descending into caves, a universal symbol of entering the unconscious. Another individual preparing for psychological renewal may encounter recurring images of sunrise, representing rebirth and new consciousness. These experiences possess unusual emotional power because they connect personal struggles with humanity's shared symbolic heritage. Jung also explored ancient alchemy to better understand these universal processes. While historians often viewed alchemy as primitive chemistry, Jung recognized it primarily as symbolic psychology. The alchemists described transforming ordinary lead into precious gold, but Jung believed this process represented inner psychological transformation rather than physical metallurgy. Lead symbolized confusion, suffering, unconsciousness, and emotional fragmentation. Gold represented psychological wholeness, wisdom, and the realization of the self. The alchemical stages closely resemble human psychological development. The first stage, often called the blackening, represents chaos, depression, uncertainty, and the collapse of familiar identity. Many people experience synchronicity most intensely during this phase because the unconscious actively guides them through emotional darkness. Strange dreams, symbolic encounters, meaningful coincidences, and recurring archetypal imagery emerge as psychological signposts directing the transformation process. The next stages involve purification, integration, and eventual renewal. These symbolic transformations occur not through intellectual knowledge alone, but through lived experience. Jung believed that synchronistic events frequently accompany these stages because they demonstrate the psyche's movement toward greater wholeness. Each meaningful coincidence becomes another piece of the unfolding psychological puzzle. Importantly, Jung emphasized that the collective unconscious should never be interpreted as mystical fantasy detached from reality. It is a psychological concept grounded in careful observation of recurring symbolic patterns across cultures, historical periods, and individual lives. Whether one approaches it scientifically, philosophically, or spiritually, the remarkable consistency of archetypal symbolism suggests that human beings share deeper psychological structures than ordinary consciousness reveals. Understanding the collective unconscious fundamentally changes how individuals perceive their own experiences. Personal suffering no longer appears isolated or meaningless. Instead, it becomes part of a universal human journey experienced across generations. Every fear, loss, hope, transformation, and moment of renewal connects the individual with countless others who have traveled similar psychological paths throughout history. This realization offers profound comfort. During moments of loneliness, despair, or uncertainty, people often believe their struggles are unique. The collective unconscious reminds us that our deepest emotional experiences belong not only to us but to humanity itself. Every archetype reflects challenges faced by countless individuals across centuries. Every synchronistic event echoes timeless patterns woven into the fabric of human existence. Ultimately, Jung believed that recognizing the collective unconscious transforms both psychology and spirituality. It reveals that beneath individual differences lies a shared symbolic language connecting every human soul. Through archetypes, myths, dreams, and synchronicity, this hidden dimension continually guides individuals toward greater self-awareness and psychological wholeness. The signs we encounter during life's most significant moments are not isolated accidents but expressions of a deeper order, reminding us that while each person's journey is unique, no one walks the path of transformation entirely alone. Many people misunderstand synchronicity because they believe its purpose is to predict the future, reveal secret messages from the universe, or confirm that every decision they make is correct. They search obsessively for repeating numbers, mysterious coincidences, or symbolic signs, hoping these experiences will provide certainty about life. Carl Jung offered a very different understanding. According to him, the true purpose of synchronicity is not prediction but transformation. Meaningful coincidences do not appear to satisfy curiosity or entertain the mind. They emerge because the psyche is trying to guide the individual toward greater self-awareness, psychological wholeness, and authentic living. Synchronicity is not about changing the external world. It is about changing the person who experiences it. Every human being is born with enormous psychological potential. Yet most people spend their lives becoming who society expects them to be rather than discovering who they truly are. From childhood, families, schools, cultures, and communities teach people what is acceptable, successful, respectable, and desirable. Gradually, individuals construct identities based on external expectations instead of inner truth. They pursue careers that impress others, maintain relationships that no longer nourish them, suppress emotions that seem unacceptable, and ignore dreams that feel impractical. Outwardly, they may appear successful, but inwardly they experience emptiness, anxiety, or a quiet sense that something essential is missing. Jung believed this inner dissatisfaction is not simply emotional weakness. It is the psyche signaling that conscious life has drifted too far from the deeper self. When this gap becomes large enough, the unconscious begins seeking communication. Dreams become more vivid. Emotional reactions intensify. Symbols appear repeatedly. Meaningful coincidences begin emerging with unusual frequency. These synchronistic experiences are not random interruptions. They are invitations to return to the path of authenticity. Transformation rarely begins with comfort. In fact, Jung believed psychological growth almost always starts with crisis. As long as life remains predictable and satisfying, there is little motivation to examine the unconscious. People continue repeating familiar habits without questioning whether those habits reflect their true nature. Only when suffering becomes unavoidable does genuine self-examination begin. A painful divorce, financial collapse, serious illness, personal failure, or existential crisis often shatters the illusion that external success alone can provide lasting fulfillment. During these moments, synchronicity becomes especially meaningful because the unconscious recognizes that the conscious mind is finally open to change. The ego, which normally insists on certainty and control, weakens under the pressure of crisis. This creates space for deeper psychological truths to emerge. Meaningful coincidences serve as symbolic guideposts pointing toward hidden aspects of the personality waiting to be acknowledged. Jung called the ultimate goal of psychological development individuation. Individuation is the lifelong process of becoming the person you were genuinely meant to become rather than the person shaped entirely by external expectations. It does not mean becoming perfect. Instead, it means becoming whole. Wholeness requires integrating every aspect of the personality, including strengths, weaknesses, fears, desires, creativity, compassion, anger, vulnerability, and wisdom. Synchronicity supports this process by drawing attention to unconscious material that needs conscious recognition. One of the greatest obstacles to transformation is the ego. The ego creates the identity people consciously recognize as themselves. It provides stability, organization, and direction. However, the ego also fears change because transformation threatens familiar identity. It resists uncomfortable truths, rejects painful emotions, and avoids uncertainty whenever possible. The unconscious, on the other hand, seeks growth rather than comfort. It recognizes that psychological development requires confronting what the ego prefers to avoid. This conflict explains why synchronistic experiences often feel emotionally unsettling. Instead of confirming existing beliefs, they challenge them. A meaningful coincidence may force someone to reconsider a relationship they believed was healthy. It may expose dissatisfaction hidden beneath years of professional success. It may awaken forgotten dreams that no longer fit current circumstances. Rather than offering reassurance, synchronicity frequently introduces uncertainty because transformation cannot occur without questioning established patterns. Jung believed that every individual carries a shadow, the hidden aspects of personality rejected by conscious identity. Many people define themselves by qualities they admire while denying characteristics they consider unacceptable. Anger, envy, fear, selfishness, insecurity, vulnerability, and even hidden talents become buried within the unconscious. Yet these rejected qualities continue influencing behavior indirectly through projection, emotional reactions, and recurring life patterns. Synchronicity often brings the shadow into awareness. A person repeatedly encountering difficult individuals may gradually recognize qualities within themselves they have consistently denied. A recurring dream or symbolic event may reveal unresolved emotional wounds demanding attention. Although these revelations can be painful, they represent essential steps towards psychological integration. Transformation requires acknowledging the complete personality rather than clinging to an idealized self-image. Another important aspect of transformation involves accepting paradox. Human beings naturally seek simple answers. We want certainty, clear definitions, and permanent conclusions. Yet Jung discovered that genuine psychological maturity embraces complexity. A person can be courageous and fearful, loving and angry, confident and uncertain at the same time. Synchronicity reflects this complexity because its symbols rarely possess only one meaning. A serpent may represent danger or healing. Fire may symbolize destruction or purification. Death in dreams often signifies psychological rebirth rather than physical ending. Learning to tolerate symbolic ambiguity expands consciousness beyond rigid categories. Transformation also requires developing a relationship with intuition. Modern culture emphasizes analysis, logic, and measurable evidence. These abilities are valuable, yet they represent only one aspect of human intelligence. Jung believed intuition serves as another legitimate way of knowing. Intuition recognizes patterns before conscious reasoning fully understands them. Synchronicity frequently activates intuition because meaningful coincidences cannot always be explained logically. Instead, they create an inner sense that something significant has occurred even before its meaning becomes intellectually clear. This intuitive awareness does not replace rational thinking. Rather, Jung argued that psychological health requires balancing both. Excessive rationality disconnects individuals from emotional depth, symbolic understanding, and unconscious wisdom. Blind intuition without critical thinking risks superstition and self-deception. Individuation integrates both approaches, allowing reason and intuition to cooperate rather than compete. One remarkable feature of synchronicity is that it often redirects attention toward neglected possibilities. Individuals frequently become trapped within narrow definitions of themselves. Someone may believe they are incapable of creativity because childhood criticism discouraged artistic expression. Another person may avoid leadership because early experiences produced insecurity. A meaningful coincidence can suddenly reopen these forgotten possibilities by reminding individuals of capacities long buried beneath conscious awareness. Transformation is rarely immediate. Synchronicity does not magically solve problems or eliminate suffering. Instead, it initiates an ongoing dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious. Every symbolic experience becomes another opportunity for reflection. Over time, these reflections gradually reshape perception, behavior, relationships, and identity. Small psychological shifts accumulate until individuals eventually realize they have become fundamentally different from the people they once were. Jung emphasized that transformation demands responsibility. It is tempting to interpret synchronicity as evidence that unseen forces will solve life's challenges without personal effort. This interpretation misunderstands the purpose entirely. Meaningful coincidences may illuminate the path, but individuals must still choose whether to walk it. A synchronistic encounter may inspire someone to change careers, reconcile relationships, pursue education, or confront long-avoided fears. Yet the decision to act always remains a matter of personal responsibility. Ignoring synchronistic experiences also carries consequences. Jung observed that when individuals repeatedly reject unconscious guidance, psychological tension often increases. Anxiety deepens. Depression intensifies. Destructive relationship patterns repeat. Emotional conflicts become more difficult to ignore. The unconscious does not punish people for resisting transformation, but unresolved psychological material naturally seeks expression. What remains unconscious eventually influences life through symptoms rather than symbols. Many spiritual traditions describe awakening as a sudden mystical event. Jung offered a more psychological perspective. Awakening occurs gradually as individuals become increasingly aware of the hidden forces shaping their thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Every synchronistic experience contributes to this awakening by expanding awareness beyond ordinary perception. The world begins appearing less mechanical and more meaningful. Daily life becomes filled with opportunities for reflection rather than automatic routine. As transformation progresses, people often notice subtle changes in their relationships with themselves and others. They become less concerned with social approval and more committed to authenticity. Fear gradually loses its power because identity no longer depends entirely upon external success. Emotional resilience increases because individuals understand that suffering often accompanies growth rather than signaling failure. Compassion deepens because recognizing one's own unconscious struggles creates greater understanding of others. Ultimately, Jung believed the highest purpose of synchronicity is to guide individuals toward the realization of the self, the deepest and most complete expression of human personality. The self is not the ego's ideal image but the harmonious integration of conscious awareness with unconscious wisdom. It represents psychological wholeness rather than perfection. Every meaningful coincidence, every recurring symbol, every emotionally powerful dream, and every unexpected encounter becomes part of this lifelong journey. None of these experiences exists merely to amaze or entertain. They exist to awaken. They gently remind individuals that beneath the surface of ordinary life lies a deeper reality where meaning, growth, and transformation continually unfold. Synchronicity whispers rather than shouts. It does not force change but invites it. It asks each person to pause, reflect, and courageously ask the most important question of all. Am I living according to who I truly am, or according to who I have merely learned to be? For Jung, answering that question honestly is the beginning of genuine transformation, and synchronicity is one of the psyche's most profound ways of leading us toward that truth.